Hello everyone! Today we're going to talk about a very specific aspect, which is the diversity of the Polish sabres. Since we are restarting a series of lectures and different talks around the subject of sabres, we will have to know or analyze the broad data on what actually are the subject of our lectures. So one of them would be the Polish sabres. The Polish sabres are very intriguing since they are one of the most diverse styles of sabres used or developed within one country, since we had this very specific way to connect things from both west, east, north and south. Therefore, we often created something that did not exist in other countries, or was only later adopted in that design in other places. So first of all, I would like to have a look at the Hungarian style sabre. So in most cases, when we are talking about Hungarian style sabres, we are meaning simple crossguard sabre with a broad yeoman and different depths of curvature. Now, the point is that there exists many types of the Hungarian style sabres. In this way, we can as well point out to Hungarian style sabres that were actually the broadsword typical for Hungarian and Polish riders that were used by hilted with sabre, the Hungarian style sabre blades. So basically speaking, the Hungarian style sabre relies on very simple aspects to not confuse you, and that is the simple crossguard, broad yeoman, and different types of curvatures. Right? Other things are not necessarily different than other pieces, other examples of other types and designs. So the thing is, now we had different types of these used in different countries. So one of the important difference within, for example, the Polish area, Polish region, or the Central European region, would be the way the hilts were, they looked like. So essentially, a Hungarian style hilt, the one preferred by Hungarians, had often curved handles, or handles almost straight with a curved pommel. So in this way, we can see the pommel caps were rather simple, without much of what we call the back piece, right? As is in this one. But for example, in Poland, we preferred the handles to be straight without that particular bend here. Of course, they were used, but they were not so popular. But there is a very Polish version that were extremely popular in the second part of the 17th century that used a little bit different design of the crossguard. It was still made in the box way. That means it's hollow inside, right? So this is a like Eastern method of making things. About that, you can search out my articles. I'll talk that. I discuss that subject. Nevertheless, the Polish version of the Hungarian often sported a typical thumb ring, and the earliest depictions of thumb rings with the Hungarian style sabres is already in the 20s of the 17th century. So in contrary to other styles, it's much earlier. In this way, we also see that Hungarians prefer longer handle than the Polish examples. and the curvature of the handle also was connected to the rather big curve of the blade. So often the Hungarian, purely Hungarian style could have what we call the changeable depth of curvature, so that we can, if we will draw circles on it, we'll have to draw several ones to cover the line of the curve, while the Polish ones were often having one big circle to cover the line of the curve. This essentially developed in Poland, at least, to the L guards. As I mentioned before, there existed in Hungarian style a lot of knucklebows that were connected to broadswords. These were often depicted in contemporary art with like messers, since these were as well the messer style sabres used throughout different periods of time, but essentially in 17th and late 16th century. There may be some confusion in identifying those sabres. Well, the typical Polish design appeared in the middle 17th century, and it created a very specific style of the knucklebow. Okay, let me grab that one. So, for example, this knucklebow is not Polish. It's much thinner. It's made of a solid piece, and it is essentially late or maybe even early 18th century pattern that was used in Austria and Hungary, while this one is a typically second part of 17th century sabre, without this characteristic element. But the earlier version of the L guards, which were not such massive ones, often sported a curved handle, had these Hungarian style blades with a broad yeoman, often broad forte, and other things that really developed the handling. Well, in these sabres, we already see the handle typical for a later design, that is the Hussar, Polish Hussar sabre. This one, this has the most classical grip of those Hussar sabres. That is something very solid. I have analyzed the subject on my Polish Hussar sabre video. You can see links in the description. Well, it retains some features of the Eastern construction, like the box design. Later, the cast ones were absolutely hollow inside. But the important thing is that this design of the hilt, of course, with the L guard, was already earlier than the actual existence of the Hussars sabre. There are even the Polish Hungarian style sabre, those simple crossguard ones, which were designed which looked like the Hussar sabre without knucklebow. So essentially, when we are talking about Hussar sabres, we have to think about very specific designs of the blades. Especially in their earlier forms, they had a back ridge which was like a T-shaped cross section, or even we had a fuller on the back of the blade, connected with lots of different fullers on each side, which were particularly common, but were not common outside of Poland. In this regard, the development of Hussar sabre started to exist within the area of the handle most often. While the blades were more and more Western style. That means one big fuller or a simplified triangular cross section would be developed. The handles were more and more going towards Western designs. So a particular piece that would be an example of that is shown on the screen. Well, you can see it has
additional side rings, the knucklebows, or much more hand protection. But what most importantly is the handle construction, which is bent and more Western, more common to the Western designs, which developed elongated the grip and stuff like that, because the fencing pattern changed a little. This is, for example, the pinnacle. I mean, not pinnacle. This is the end of the Polish Hussar sabre development. That is the national cavalry sabre. That is the kościuszkówka. Right? It was developed before Kościuszko was actually even in his teens. And essentially, this weapon was very very particular. So it was designed and developed to connect the new pattern of typical cavalry weapons of German countries, and connect to the Polish style and Polish elements. So it developed a very particular one. As you can see, we have a bulge handle with a broad pommel, and it essentially carried a very different handling. In the end, there are several other Eastern designs, like for example the Karabela. Karabela, which is some say it has been developed from in Turkey. The Turkish sources say it was developed in Poland. So there is lots of things to say about the Karabela, but the most important stuff is that in Poland and Hungary there was a particular version with a broadened pommel, okay, and a broadened handle, which helped the typical handling to be developed. While the blade was often very Eastern. In that way, we cannot omit another one, the Golden Horde sabre. The Golden Horde sabre is essentially a continuation of the Mongolian, the early medieval style of sabres. So these were very interesting, since in 18th century they were very popular, along with having tons of embroidery. They were very along with the Karabelas, they were very expensive, and the parade swords, well, they of course had their battle capacity, since they were designed for battle. It had many sub styles and sub designs, which were in essence much, how may I say, they were different. They had the Czeczugas, which had a very fun nail in the end, which was supposed to develop thrusting, or the blades were a little bit different or shorter than the typical Ordynka design. The Golden Horde sabre is essentially what we can see as a Mongolian or back then Crimean Tatar design, developed with some Armenian and Polish characteristics. So there are many other sabres that were used in Poland, but they were not particularly typical or maybe adopted in a way that were common to us, and they were just used throughout the most of the country. So if you like it, subscribe to the channel, watch later videos, and of course I would like to invite you to the online courses I will be restarting next month. More information on our site that is in the description.